Unscripted, unfiltered, unapologetic. Diner stops and real talk. The voice of farmers, not politicians or promise makers. Just honest conversation about agriculture's biggest issues. At the table today. This is The Farmer's Table, an original series from Pivot Bio.
Hello, and welcome once again to The Farmer's Table. I'm Andrew McCrea, host of the American Countryside and a farmer in Northwest Missouri. We head to the Cornhusker State for today's conversation. And as farmers gather around the table, the talk turns to water, a precious resource for growers in this part of farm country. I'm joined by three experienced farmers from the western half of the Grain Belt, two from Nebraska, Quentin Connealy from Tekamah, Randy Uhrmacher from Hastings, and Ron Rabou of Albin, Wyoming. Let's get the conversation started.
So we hear a lot about changing weather patterns. I mean, where I'm at, I can see some changes, but what are you all experiencing out there?
Well, I can tell you that, first of all, I think everything goes in cycles. I really do. I can tell you that the wind blows as hard in Wyoming as it ever has. So I know for sure that that hasn't changed.
We have ups and downs. I always remember the ups and downs in the rain, rain patterns. The only thing I see different is our winters have less snow than they used to. Mm-hmm. Maybe because it's a little bit warmer. We don't get the minus 10s every week like we used to. But, other than rain patterns, I feel we've gotten just as much, if not more, overall. Mm-hmm. The last 2 years have been pretty dry, but up until then, we had some pretty wet years in there. So
it seems like we're fighting water more than we are droughts. 2012 was dry, 2022 is dry, and then it seems like every few years we're fighting water, getting water off us down to the river. So it just comes in cycles. You just never know.
If you take, for an example, the 30s, kind of that Dust Bowl era, where it was really super dry, I don't necessarily know as though we're a whole lot further away from that right now. I think our farming practices truly are that much better. So we're not seeing the repercussions of the dry weather that maybe we did, 70, 80, 90, 100 years ago.
All our tools, tillage, no-till's getting to be a real big thing. So less passes, less fuel, all that's conserving our moisture. So I'm a conventional tiller, so I'm totally with tillage, but I still have to listen to the conversation and adapt because we're gonna have to start no-tilling some more. I think just if we can make it work, and it's just make it work on your farm.
Well, I think that's one of the advantages that we have farming in the 21st century, is that we have this technology at our fingertips where we can say, digitally, we can say, if a circle's X amount of miles away, we know where those moisture levels are. We know when that moisture came and when we need to do that. For us, it really boils down to cultivation. And so what types, because we're organic, what types of cultivation can we use that pull the least amount of moisture possible? And for us, a lot of times that's leaving a lot of residue on top if we have that residue, to help seal that moisture in.
Seems like it always comes down to efficiency. Like we're trying to conserve water. I mean, we catch some rains. I'm right on the Iowa border, Nebraska border, so we catch some rains here and there, but it all comes down to being efficient, like using what moisture you have and keeping it there. So
every location has its own set of unique challenges. Yeah. So, and water for you is way more critical than it is for us.
Well, the joke at home is kind of, we measure rain by the hundredths of an inch, and people say, what's a hundredth? But that's how we measure it at home. And so I know all summer we were just really begging for just a tenth of an inch here and there. And for us, with where we're at and the sandy soils that we have, sandy loam soils that we have, that a tenth or a quarter would make a massive difference. And we didn't get that this year. I mean, we had crops that we planted in May that hadn't sprouted in August. And that proved to be really challenging for this year.
We got plenty of irrigation, so we're running pivots when we can and sufficing. But we're not regulated by any means yet, but it's always going to come sometime, so we're watching it.
Yeah, Randy, you've got it tougher though. You're further west.
Yeah, we've farmed some down the Republican River Valley, which is limited to 9 inches a year. And you get a 5-year allocation for that, so you can use them 9 inches per year, which 45 inches over the life of that 5 years. Back in Hastings, in Adams County, we aren't restricted yet, but there are rules in place that if the aquifer drops below a certain level, that will trigger a 12-inch per year allocation for us up there.
I think you're right. It really comes down to efficiency, that we're all in different, we're all in a different part of the country, and we all have these different challenges that we have to deal with. And another guy's challenges, of course, from across the country look like they wouldn't be near as hard as ours, but we're not the one living in those.
Yeah, you constantly monitor and even watch the weather ahead. I'll look at the weather 3 days out, and if I have a field that, okay, we had a rain last week, do I start the pivot or not? You look at the weather, and if the forecast is giving an 80% chance of heavy rains, you look at the pivot, the ground, and probe it and stuff, and go, no, I can wait. I can see if that rain materializes or not. I've saved a lot of circles doing stuff like that.
Well, I mean, I look at the guys at home that have center pivots, and I think to myself, man, wouldn't that be nice to have a center pivot? Then I know friends that have center pivots, and they said, you don't want that problem. You don't want the fuel bill, the electric bill to pump that water. You don't want to have to fix those pumps, in the middle of the night when they're not working. But also they tell me too, and you guys probably know this as well, that even though you're in a different part of the country, that if you don't get rain, if Mother Nature does not give us rain, you can't put enough water on a crop to make it work.
No, you can't. You can't keep up with just irrigation. You have to have help from above.
Yeah.
And whether it's dry land or irrigated acres, that rain is so crucial.
Probably one of our biggest challenges is in Wyoming, particularly when we raise our the ground that we put our hard red winter wheat on. We'll tear that out in, say, May, and then that needs to really stay. We work all summer long to keep that weed free, so that ground has rested over that period of time, and then we'll plant in September. And so that's a concept that many of those in the Midwest don't understand. It's called fallow. And so I always joke with everyone about that. I mean, it's a big deal with where we're at. But for us, the challenge is if it doesn't rain and you're continually running mechanical tillage through those fields, every time you do that, you're going to lose moisture.
Yeah, that's the first year we've noticed how hard the ground is, like Randy was talking about earlier. When you get that lack of moisture, it's just that ground's so hard, you just can't get any, especially a planter in the ground, where that's where it all starts.
Farmers have always taken care of what they value. They cultivated bountiful land and fed a nation hungry for progress. As Americans dialed up, precision on the farm led to yields once thought impossible. But when it came to nitrogen, it wasn't precise or predictable enough. Farmers deserve a nitrogen worthy of who they are and what their land can provide. And now there is one.
Are you guys receiving pressure from, I'm going to say outside, like from outside of agriculture, over how much water we in agriculture are using? What's the situation? Because we hear about, groups that are saying, hey, ag's using too much water. So what are you guys hearing?
It's all over. Yeah, as you get closer to the big cities, you're going to face that. I'm about 45 miles north of Omaha, and they want to get all the water they can and reserve it. So it's got to be on your radar. You got to be watching for it and get more efficient, because it's going to be here one day.
Yeah, and I think that we're going to see more of that as our country becomes more populated. And as people, I think, also become more disconnected for where their food comes from. That I know that there's a lot more regulation in our area than there used to be. Like those guys who have center pivots now are regulated on meters, so they're paying attention to what they're using. But I think that there's a crucial component here that we as agriculture don't really engage the public like we need to, because if you look at if you were to ask the general public, what is the #1 irrigated crop in America, I think most of them would say probably, we're familiar with corn, so corn takes a lot of water. But the answer to that is lawns. And so I think we have a tendency as people to really point our fingers at other people to say, you're the problem, without really identifying where are we really using that water. And if the #1 irrigated crop in the United States of America is lawns, how come we're not talking about that? Because we're not feeding people with our lawns, right? But we're feeding people with the crops that we grow. And I think that that's an important thing that we need to be able to advocate as production agriculturalists to say, look, we're providing a benefit for society here.
There's so few of us against the population too, so that's why you really gotta, your voice doesn't, you gotta go really far with your voice.
Yeah, and your voice matters.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
That's right. Well, have you figured out a way to tell the people with lawns that you're wrong and not sound mean?
Well, that's the challenge, right? Is trying to, people always seem to have an opinion about something until it affects them. And then a lot of times that opinion will change. And I think that that's a lot of times where we're at in this country, is that we're pretty good at pointing the finger at the other guy, right? But what are we doing together collectively as production agriculturalists to say, what are we doing to communicate and collaborate and advocate for what we're giving to this country and what we're supplying to this country?
Yeah, it is a big challenge, and we have all these activists, seems like headwinds that we're pushing against all the time. They have all the answers, but I don't think they have the whole picture either. So somehow we've got to get the whole picture out there for people to help them understand what everybody's up against.
Yeah, all of us, inside agriculture and outside, are part of this. So how do you come up with an answer and get people to figure out how to use this water, this resource, the best?
Good question. If we had the answers, we'd be doing it.
We would. I think that that's right. It's the $1 million question. How do we communicate that effectively? I think number one is just to become knowledgeable about it. How many people know that? And then to really do this. Sit around at a table at a local coffee shop and talk about what are we doing to make it better. And it's not just about raising the highest yielding crop or the crop that has the highest quality. It's about doing it with the limited, as few resources as we possibly can. How do we do that? Because when you pump water on your center pivots, that costs money. So you prefer, of course,
Rain.
not to pump that water. We prefer rain.
Irrigation's not fun. I'd rather have it rain. So, I mean, we don't want to be adding water. So,
I would
mean,
too.
it's a lot of money and work. I was like,
Absolutely.
babysitting pivots all week or all summer. It's not fun. So, we love Mother Nature and rain. So let her rain.
I prefer rain because everything just works better that way. And so I think that is part of our mission. It's part of what we need to do as agriculturalists, is we have to get good at not just that. We have to get good at not necessarily defending our position, but really promoting the position that we're in and advocating for that value, like I said. I think the essence is that we all have agricultural roots somehow. It might be far down in our lineage, but we all have that somewhere, and we can find and we can build camaraderie around something that we all do, and that is that we eat.
The bottom line for these farmers, communication is nearly as important as rain to the future of their operations. We want to thank Quentin, Randy, and Ron for offering their front row perspective on this critical issue. I'm Andrew McCrea. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time on The Farmer's Table.